Witcher's universe is cruel and ruthless. It is inhabited by nightmarish monsters of incredible power, and people in this world must survive. They must overcome the difficult life conditions of Neverland or adapt to them. What if the monster that lives close nearby has enormous power? What if it cannot be defeated? What if this monster can live for hundreds and hundreds of years? What if it's immortal? What to do? Run away from the habitat of this monster? Maybe hide from it, study its behavior and try to survive? Or perhaps the best thing to do is to kneel before the powerful creature. Recognize the monster as a deity and learn to coexist with it. Pray for the mercy of this monster. Worship it like a god. Give it everything it asks for: jewelry, food, people. In fact, the latter is the most obvious and simple way. It is easy to adjust people's laws to circumstances. Of course, there is the rule like "thou shalt not steal," but if the whole neighborhood feels reach up to the theft, why not raid the land nearby? Of course, there is the rule "thou shalt not kill," but if just a few murders will become the basis of prosperity for the settlement, why not go for it? So if a deity requires human sacrifice, frankly speaking, one can provide it. This is how human perception of good and evil is distorted under certain circumstances. As a result, the cruel, powerful, bloody monsters of Neverland become real deities in some human settlements or even entire nations. They demand blood and death, and people accustomed to this state of affairs are ready to give them this blood and death. Well, we at the Old Witcher channel are ready to provide you with more content on the Witcher universe. So do make some hot tea and subscribe to the channel, because the Old Witcher is about to tell you the story of the monsters of Neverland who became gods. Melazine. To begin with, we will go to the Skellige Islands, a harsh land where the number of different religions, cults and beliefs practiced by the locals is simply off the charts. Most of the deities believed in on Skellige are at least ambiguous in nature, and the religions that have sprung up around them preach rather harsh laws. And of course, among all these cults, there are extremely bloody ones. They are of course based around powerful and incredibly old monsters who are greedy for blood and suffering. Monsters that keep the whole landmass in real terror. The first one of them is named Melazine. The cult of Melazine originated on the island of Spikeroog a long time ago. The first inhabitants of the area encountered an invincible monster, an old echidna who considered the land to be her own. Unable to defeat the monster, the people decided to simply submit to the echidna, began to worship it, and began to appease it with gifts. Instead, Melazine at least did not destroy all life in the area. Once in a generation, the followers of the Melazine cult offered a human sacrifice to their mistress. Most often, a girl from a noble family was chosen for this fate. She was given a new name, the Child of the Pharaohs or the Sea Bride. It was believed that it was a great honor to become a sacrifice for Melazine because people believed that the echidna could command the weather and even the waves of the sea. Prayers to the monster were offered not only by the inhabitants of Spikeroog, but also by sailors throughout Skellige. They sincerely believed in the protection that this monster could supposedly provide. They loved their goddess and even said that the mistress sits on her throne, absorbing our gifts and demanding new ones. But in everything else, she does not tell us what to do, and therefore she's better than any Jarl. Despite all this, Melazine was not a deity, no matter how much the people of Spikeroog believed in it. She was a very ancient monster, but at the same time a fairly common monster in Neverland, as there were plenty of them on Skellige and the mainland. It built its nest in a cave near the village of Svorlag, and everyone on the island knew that it was better to avoid these places. Even cultists did not approach Melazine's house. They did so only when they offered sacrifices to their deity and performed rituals. It was rumored that the old echidna's nest looked like a throne. That is why people called the monster the true queen of Spikeroog. Almost no one remembered the story of the appearance and rise of this ancient monster. Yet too much time had passed since the locals first met Melazine, and more than one generation of people along with that. Only the wisest of the druids kept this legend alive to tell it to the followers of the goddess. No one will be able to verify the truth of this story, but the memory of it must be preserved forever. This story began several hundreds of years before the current events of the Neverland world, when the Skellige Islands were a much wilder and more dangerous place. In the sea waters near Spikerog, there was a sea witch named Fukuzia. She grew up in the sea and belonged to the underwater race of Neverland. By the way, do write in the comments if you would like a separate video about the underwater inhabitants of the Witcher's universe. So, Fukuzia was a very unusual witch. While ordinary inhabitants of the underwater world hated humans and were quite unhappy with the fact that people were actively settling on the islands, Fukuzia was always attracted to human settlements and the way people lived. She often spied on how life was organized in settlements on land. One day, Fukuzia met a Skellige pirate named Ryogan of the Faroe Islands. He often sailed on his ship and flirted with Fukuzia, noticing that this strange sea woman was spying on him. Fukuzia fell madly in love with Ryogan. Even though the sea creature did not receive the same strong feeling in return, she still did not leave the pirate alone. Even though he did not love the strange sea creature, it did not change anything for her. When the pirate went on raids, Fukuzia gave him amulets and blessings that saved his life more than once. One day, however, his luck ran out and he was killed in a naval battle. Fukuzia experienced incredible heartache that she had never even suspected was possible. She simply could not bear the death of her beloved, and so she was ready to do anything to bring him back. Fukuzia gathered all her strength and all her knowledge, and with the help of powerful magic tried to resurrect Ryogan. "May his life burn as brightly as our love," she shouted in the end. And the pirate really rose from the dead. But in her spell, Fukuzia did not consider one detail. Yes, she really loved Ryogan incredibly, but he felt almost nothing for her in return, and during his life he had cheated on the sea dweller with ordinary human women more than once. That's why the phrase, "May his life burn as brightly as our love," became fatal for the pirate. That was because the spell did not completely resurrect Ryogan, and he did not feel alive, even though his body had risen from the dead. Just as there was never any mutual love between Fukuzia and Ryogan, because it burned only halfway, only on Fukuzia's side. Likewise, Ryogan was resurrected only halfway through. After returning from the afterlife, the pirate was unhappy. In the hope of finding some meaning in life or experiencing some emotions, the lifeless but not dead Ryogan abandoned Fukuzia, broke her heart and destroyed her love. And without this love, the spell could no longer work at all. What was left of Ryogan began to fade away. Nowadays, the residents of Spikerog sit around campfires at night and tell stories about the ghost of a pirate who roams the local beaches. They say that he has no interest in anything in the real world and seems to be moving around in circles without a purpose. He just walks forward, step by step, day by day, like a corpse raised from the grave that had not been fully filled with life. That's what they say. This ghost cannot even go out to sea. The curse of the sea witch has made the sea alien to him. Fukuzia, on the other hand, was filled with hatred for all people on land. She still needed love, so she picked a young echidna, named her Melusine, and instilled in her the same hatred for all living things. She claimed that Melusine was her daughter and ordered Melusine to keep the entire Spikerog in fear. Only by appeasing the monster with sacrifices can its rage be contained. And even the need to sacrifice a young girl to Melusine once in a generation does not change anything. People are ready to do anything to survive. Especially since if you don't make a human sacrifice, Melusine will simply kill everyone on the island. This is a kind of alternative. Moreover, Melusine bestows blessings on the faithful followers of her cult. Thus, Fukuzia's daughter has become a deity and she behaves accordingly. She punishes the infidels and bestows blessings on her subjects. And this way, the broken heart of a sea woman led the entire population of the island of Spikerog to worship a goddess named Melusine. Svelblod. However, Melusine is not the only monster worshipped on Skellige. Another horrific cult has flourished on the islands. The cultists, intoxicated by cruelty and death, offer bloody gifts to a deity named Svelblod. Even if we compare it with the belief in Melusine, the cult of Svelblod still appears to be an incredibly cruel and aggressive religion. It was born a long time ago, back in the days of the first Jarls of Skellige. But even then, this cult became a real scourge for the island people. It got to the point where the Jarls had to simply ban this cult from the territory of Skellige under the penalty of death. All because the Skelligeans who believed in Svelblod united, and without tolerating any civilized laws, simply started a civil war against the legitimate rulers of Skellige. They were led by a powerful warrior named Nut the Kalos, and it was only through the joint efforts of the armies of all the Jarls that Nut's troops were stopped. Many years have passed since then, but the cult of Svelblod has continued to exist underground and recruit new adherents. It could not be eradicated because the secrets were kept very well. Only a person who is a true believer and is ready to sacrifice absolutely everything can join the ranks of Svelblod's followers. The same Skelligeans, thanks to whom the cult retained its power on the islands, united into one caste and began to call themselves the Wildkarls. They were incredibly physically strong, resistant to poisons or injuries, and in the midst of a battle they could fall into an incredible rage, killing everyone around them, sparing neither their own nor others. They would eat a piece of a special mushroom called Modron, and after a while they would turn into really big bears that would break through any ranks of the enemy. It was rumored that just one small group of Werbeer Wildkarls could withstand an entire army. Those powerful warriors were a real treasure for the Jarls during wars or raids. But they became a real headache when it came to relatively peaceful times. It was difficult for the Wildkarls to get along with ordinary people. Even by Skellige standards, the Wildkarls were called savages. The Wildkarls never had wives or children. All they had on their minds was war, and in times of peace, hunting. But their community did not die, probably because they always had plenty of new followers. Fresh blood. Many boys and men were tempted by the incredible power of the Wildkarls and did everything to join them. No one was deterred by the nightmarish trials that fell to the lot of a person who decided to become a Wildkarl. The one who chose the fate of a Wildkarl first had to come to the village of Fornhalla, where all Wildkarls lived. Fornhalla was located on the territory of the Drummond clan, which was ruled by Jarl Madman Lugos. Of course, everyone knew about the existence of the Wildkarls, but for a long time no one suspected that they worshipped Svelblod, which was banned on the islands. Obviously, it was Jarl Lugos who was hiding these cultists from punishment, but that's not the point. Let's get back to the rituals. Candidates for the Wildkarl had to pass several tests of physical strength, after which they would face a bloody battle, a battle to the death. They would take off all their clothes, exposing themselves to the torso, put on gloves covered with nails, and duel with another Wildkarl with the same gloves covered with nails. The three strongest, those who survived these duels, remained in the Wildkarl community. The three weaker ones died and were sacrificed to Svelblod. After this duel, it was time for the last test. At first, the three survivors looked for beer bait. Then the priests of Svelblod and the candidates for the Wildkarls went down to the cave under Fornhalla. There they set up their baits, and the priest called out to Svelblod, performing ancient magic with ritual gestures and spells. Eventually, 3 bears came out of the cave. All of them followed the smell of the bait. At this time, the priest gave the warriors a taste of special hallucinogenic mushrooms. Those mushrooms immersed people in a trance, made them defenseless and indifferent. Then the bears immediately switched from bait to men, attacked them, tore their bodies apart, and ate their bodies. When the last piece of flesh was consumed, the bears suddenly froze as if spellbound, and a few minutes later began to change. Animal features disappeared, and in their places appeared a human face, torso, arms, and legs. The bears turned into the very Wildkarls, whose flesh they had just eaten. Along with meat, human consciousness penetrated the beast's brains. Like a parasite, it completely took over the instincts of the beast. Finally, a full-fledged Werbeer was born. Half bear, half man. Wildkarl. The whole process was controlled by the High Priest of Svelblod. The trial was considered complete when the new-formed Wildkarls opened their eyes. Now they were Werbeers, shapeshifters. Now all they had to do to become bears was eat a special mushroom, the Modron. This is how Svelblod's army was formed. For the first time, hundreds of years ago, the cult of the ancient god was defeated only in a civil war. There were many people who wanted incredible strength and power. When Svelblod's army was first defeated, the priests of the cult were tied up, put into dracars without sails, and pushed out to the sea. But even such measures could not lead to complete disappearance of the cult. Svelblod is alive as long as at least one of his followers is alive. Another time, the village of the Wildkarls who worshipped Svelblood was destroyed by the actions of Hjalmar Ankreid and the Witcher Geralt of Rivia. But what if the faith in Svelblood survived for the second time? Who knows whether the ugly god, whose body resembles a battlefield, has been defeated? After all, there are many more dark, eerie caves hidden in the little explored, uninhabited rocks of the Skellige archipelago. Who knows what evil lies deep inside them? As for the trials of the Wildkarls, the price they paid to the god Svelblood, it was exorbitant. Even the Witcher's trial of the grasses is a cakewalk compared to the path of the Wildkarl. It's hard to imagine how powerful a Wildkarl army could be under a clever command. Hordes of werbears, shapeshifters with little vulnerability to weapons, can demolish anything in their path. As long as there is at least one follower of Svelblood, this force will remain a great danger to the Witcher's universe. This danger is very real, for the Higher Vampire, Detlef van der Eretain, has created the Rite of the Crimson Curse. He did it for his own personal purposes and did not even think about the consequences for the other side of the world. The Crimson Curse was an ancient symbol of Svelblood. This phenomenon was discovered by the researchers of the ancient Skellige caves. The ancient cultists of Svelblood perceived this curse as the highest sign of their deity's patronage. It was the origin of the belief in the bloody bear god. And so, the vampire Detlef invoked the Crimson Curse again. The blood moon rose over Neverland. It was a sign to all the secret admirers of Svelblood who were operating in the underground, a sign that it was time to act. Now they will come out again to claim their rights, and only the Creator knows what will happen on the Skellige Islands after that. Garnikora. Finally, we will leave the Skellige Islands. After crossing the sea, we will head to the Yaruga River Delta. As you know, Drakars were unique in that they could navigate both the sea and rivers well. So we will move along the Yaruga riverbed, actively paddling to overcome the current. We will reach a seemingly nice land called Angren, a land that hides a real horror, an eternal evil. This disgusting and bloodthirsty creature keeps the locals in fear. Unable to resist the powerful beast, people, as is often the case, began to worship it. They began to appease the monster with gifts and sacrifices. Thus, they became just like that evil and became its helpers. We are talking about the swamps of Angren, the cursed land of a majestic kingdom, a harrier called Isgith, and the true ruler of those lands, the terrible and powerful Garnikora, a shapeless, horrible monster that drives all living beings crazy and has already conquered the entire region. But how did it all begin in Isgith? Where did this nightmare in the swamps come from? Did you know that in fact there are several versions of the origin of Garnikora? The first of them is the most common and, as is often the case, the least likely to be true. It has become more of a scary story among the people. This story tells of a Rovian princess who had to travel through Angren. She was on her way to the court in Vizima, where her future fiancé, one of the sons of the good king Cedric of Temeria, was waiting for her. An excellent match. The princess realized this, but fate had a cruel surprise for her. The princess's chariot lost its way, got bogged down, and drowned in the swamps called Isgith. The girl managed to survive, but was left alone in an unknown land, in the dark, cold territory without supplies and almost no hope of rescue. For long days and nights she called for help, wandering through endless swamps searching for the road. But at one point her strength ran out. Weakened, she fell to the ground and her body was immediately covered with leeches, the most numerous inhabitants of those swamps. Huge, wet, slippery. At first the princess tried to yank them off her body, but she was not strong enough even for that. The leeches bit into her flesh and drank every last drop of blood from the princess. But even death did not bring the princess's soul the peace it had been waiting for. The locals believed that Isgith had been a cursed place since time immemorial, and that's why the soul of the noble lady could not leave the swamp. She returned to her dry, leech-covered body and merged with those horrible bloodsuckers. She was no longer a human being, but a completely different creature. She got transformed into a monster, of which the fleshy leeches of the Isgith swamps were an integral part. This is how Garnikora appeared, the bloody mistress, the ruler of Isgith, the mistress of the swamp, the mother of the terrible leeches, a deadly, powerful monster, and, in the end, a goddess for the locals. The second version of Guernicora's emergence seemed more realistic because in addition to oral folklore, it fits more logically into the picture of the world of Neverland. According to this assumption, Guernicora was supposedly born immediately after the end of the conjunction of the spheres in Isgith. The reason for her appearance was a burst of magic that caused the entirety of Isgith to be filled with powerful energy, a force that changed all living things in Isgith. Over time, the excess of magical energy resulted in a strange, terrifying monster named Guernicora. The elves of Anne Shade, who ruled the mainland at the time, tried to defeat the ruler of Isgith, but failed because Guernicora sucked up too much energy and was too powerful. They gave the monster its name, Gvern Iker, which meant Bloody Mistress. Humans later changed the name, and the elven Gvern Iker became Guernicora. The Queen of the Swamps used her own blood to intoxicate animals and even sentient beings. This blood drove both beasts and various elves or dwarfs, for example, who tasted it, crazy. It subjugated creatures to the will of Guernicora, and the monster itself, the source of this infection, was hiding in the heart of the swamps. Even finding the monster was not an easy task. The leeches absorbed Guernicora's poisonous and toxic blood and swelled in size. Like ripe fruits, they hung from the trees, shiny and thick, ready at any moment to fall on an unsuspecting traveler and bring poison into their bloodstream. At that moment, the magic of Guernicora began to work. A person became doomed. They became another drugged victim of the monster of Isgith. That's how 3 different monsters of Neverland managed to conquer entire settlements of people and turned into real gods according to these same people. As for you, fabulous viewers, the old Witcher would be very happy if you liked this video and subscribed to the channel, and then no monster would ever rule over you. Write in the comments which monster gods of the Witcher's universe we should tell you about in the next video. Dagon, Veopatis, Lilith, or maybe something else. We'll definitely take your suggestions into consideration. In any case, big thanks to everyone who watched this video to the end, and the old Witcher will see you all real soon.